Diplomatic tragedy in Paris, the shocking death of South Africa's Ambassador Nathi Mthethwa. Welcome to the Bold African Voice, BAV, where Africa speaks boldly, critically, and without apology. I'm Zainab Karoma. Today, we confront a shocking tragedy. The sudden death of South Africa's ambassador to France, Nathi Mthethwa, found dead in Paris just 24 hours after being reported missing. Was it a personal crisis, political pressure, or a system that failed one of its own? Let's break it down. On the 30th of September 2025, Emmanuel Nathi Mthethwa, South Africa's ambassador to France, was found dead at the base of the Hyatt Regency Hotel in the Port-Maillot district of Paris. His wife had reported him missing about 24 hours earlier after receiving a distressing message in which he apologized and expressed intentions to end his life. Initial French investigations indicate he fell from his 22nd floor hotel room and that the window's safety mechanism had been forcibly opened, with scissors reportedly found at the scene, though no sign of struggle or drugs was detected. A suicide note addressed to his wife has also been confirmed by the Paris prosecutor's office. Reuters, South Africa's foreign affairs apparatus, DIRCO, confirmed the ambassador's passing, but deferred detailed comment pending the French inquiry. President Cyril Ramaphosa and other senior officials offered condolences, describing the death as untimely and a national loss. Mthethwa was a veteran of South African politics and diplomacy with a long track record, starting in the anti-apartheid union movement, rising through the ranks of the ANC, and holding key ministerial positions, notably Minister of Police, later Arts and Culture and Sports. His time in the police portfolio was especially controversial, tied as it is to the Marikana massacre of 2012. A blistering scar in South Africa's post-apartheid history. As events unfold, many questions remain. Was this purely a tragic case of suicide, or was something more sinister at play? How will South African and African diplomatic standards, norms, and accountability evolve in light of such a high-profile tragedy? And what lessons might be drawn with a bit of wryness about the fragility of human ambition, even at the heights of power? Probing the known facts and unknowns. The timeline, as far as we can reconstruct it. 1. On Monday evening, 29th of September, Mthethwa's wife reportedly received a message from him in which he apologized and allegedly expressed suicidal intentions. 2. He was reported missing soon after. 3. His cell phone was last traced to around 3 p.m. Monday near the Bois de Boulogne in western Paris. 4. French police, including K9 units, searched the area overnight, including the parked woods, in hopes of locating him. 5. At dawn on the 30th of September, a hotel security guard discovered his body in the inner courtyard of the Hyatt Hotel. 6. Paris prosecutors confirmed he had reserved the 22nd floor room and that the window's safety latch had been tampered with. Scissors were reportedly left behind. 7. Investigators found no indication of a physical struggle and no traces of medications or illegal substances. 8. Authorities contend a suicide note addressed to his wife was found. These factors suggest that, at least in the French preliminary narrative, Mthethwa's death was a deliberate act rather than foul play. But of course, the devil, or perhaps the diplomat, is in the details. Flags, red herrings, and open questions. Why force open a secured window? If someone intends self-harm, why go through the trouble of bypassing a safety mechanism rather than using the open air more directly? Investigators say scissors were found at the scene. No signs of struggle, but what about interference? The absence of visible struggle doesn't preclude subtler coercion or duress. The window may have been forced by another actor, though French authorities seem to lean away from third-party involvement, at least initially. Was there motive or pressure? Mthethwa had recently been implicated in ongoing corruption and political interference investigations in South Africa, including allegations that during his tenure as police minister, he obstructed investigations into politically connected cases. Could that create pressure? Mental health and personal crisis. Reports from French and international media indicate that Mthethwa may have suffered from depression. The message to his wife suggests emotional or psychological crisis, though much remains speculative. Timing and location, choosing to do this in a foreign capital from a diplomatic suite. What symbolism or psychology lies there? Diplomatic immunities and cross-jurisdictional complexity. As a diplomat, Mthethwa and his apartment might enjoy special protections. How that intertwines with French criminal procedure is non-trivial. In short, the French narrative is consistent with deliberate act, no third party, but many observers will and should push for a robust, transparent forensic accounting, not least because of the high stakes and high profile. African comparisons. Does this tell us something more? While Mthethwa's fate is tragic and exceptional, we can situate it in a broader African diplomatic and political context. Some parallels and contrasts are instructive. Comparable incidents and diplomatic deaths. There have been past instances in Africa and globally of diplomats or high-ranking officials dying abroad under murky circumstances, e.g. sudden falls, suicides, or accidents. However, none in recent memory at quite this diplomatic rank, former minister turned ambassador, and with so much contemporary scrutiny. In Nigeria, for instance, the mysterious deaths or disappearances of political figures have often sparked conspiracy theories, yet many remain unresolved. In Kenya or Uganda, diplomats or officials occasionally find themselves in accidents abroad, but not, as far as I recall, in exactly analogous settings of a forced open window investigation. One difference: many African regimes have weaker capacity or political will to demand full foreign investigations. South Africa, by virtue of its institutions and societal pressures, is more likely to push. Political culture, accountability, and reputation risks. Many African states face a perennial tension. On the one hand, they want to project strong diplomacy and image abroad. On the other hand, internal political scandals or accountability gaps often undermine that image. In that sense, the Mthethwa tragedy is a test case. How robust will South Africa's internal oversight and public scrutiny be? Some states might have simply hushed this kind of event or allowed diplomatic immunity to truncate inquiries. That would risk fueling rumor mills and popular cynicism. South Africa, as a constitutional democracy with a relatively active press, is less likely to succeed in that route without backlash, soft power, and diplomatic norms. If diplomatic posts across Africa begin to feel unsafe, either in perception or in reality, countries may rethink how they staff and supervise ambassadors. This incident might trigger, continent-wide, enhanced psychological support protocols for diplomats abroad, more stringent oversight and check-ins when ambassadors operate in high-stress posts, greater risk insurance and security protocols around lodging, access, and surveillance. One can imagine the occasional African ambassador at a diplomatic gathering whispering to a colleague, "Better avoid those 22nd floor penthouses in Paris, mon ami." Comparative impact on foreign policy stability. In many African settings, the sudden death of a senior figure, especially abroad, can create real instability, abrupt shifts in foreign relations, power jockeying, and rumor-driven backlash. South Africa is relatively resilient, but even here, the shock could ripple through governmental morale, diplomatic appointments, and interministerial tensions. Forward-looking, what this might mean, and maybe one or two bad jokes. 1. The investigation will define the narrative. If the French probe is airtight, transparent, and conclusive, it may settle much of the speculation. But if loopholes, delays, or opacity remain, the story may mutate into conspiracy theories, some plausible, others wild. The South African government will need to actively manage messaging, if only to prevent Mthethwa Gate 2.0. 2. South Africa's diplomatic posture under pressure. Other African nations will watch closely. Some may seek to dispatch reviews of their diplomatic corps and mental health support systems. Some may even broker cooperative treaties with host nations to expedite investigations when diplomats die or disappear under ambiguous conditions. 3. Legacy and reputation risks for Mthethwa and parties accused. Because Mthethwa was already implicated in corruption inquiries, his death raises serious questions. Will investigations into his conduct now sputter or be tainted? Opponents or victims of his policies may press harder for accountability, especially in areas like Marikana, police interference, and political assassinations. 4. Public trust and political fallout. Internally, South Africa faces a dilemma: how to balance respect for privacy and grief with demands for clarity and justice. If public trust is eroded, this could compound disillusionment with the ruling party and its elites. Some might jokingly, or less so, suggest that the phrase "fall from grace" has never been more literal. 5. Diplomatic recruitment, training, and oversight revisited. Expect an internal audit. Who qualifies to be an ambassador? What mental health checks are in place? How are crisis interventions handled? If I were the shadow foreign minister in some capital, I would now start pushing for ambassador stress tests. Yes, in all seriousness, and hopefully not stand-up comedy. 6. Regional diplomacy ripples. France and European capitals more broadly will watch how South Africa handles this. If Pretoria presses too hard, diplomatic friction could ensue. If Pretoria is seen as too passive, it could be viewed as weak. It's a high-wire balancing act. Critical reflections: what this incident exposes. 1. The burden of public life and private crisis. Even seasoned politicians may carry emotional baggage. That diplomats are symbols doesn't mean they are immune to psychological frailty. The more we mythologize power, the less we understand its human cost. 2. Opacity in accountability culture. Because Mthethwa was already a contested figure, some will treat his death as closing a file. That would be dangerous. Transparent institutional closure must outweigh the convenience of silence. 3. Diplomacy as both shield and trap. Being an ambassador is glamorous. Receptions, red carpets, global tete-a-tetes. But being abroad also means distance from home, absence of familiar support systems, and the need to manage pressures from both sending and receiving states. Perhaps in some cases, the very prestige of the post can magnify isolation. 4. The fragility of institutional memory. If key actors depart suddenly, projects, negotiations, and initiatives often lose momentum. One worried diplomat might lament, "We spent months arranging that UNESCO delegation. Who will pick up the baton now?" 5. A cautionary tale for press, civil society, and oversight bodies. While conspiracy theories are easy to spin, in this case, strong journalism, forensic scrutiny, and civil society pressure may well be the guardians of truth. A well-functioning democracy doesn't bury its ghosts. It exhumes them carefully. Latest developments as of writing. French prosecutors have begun a full legal inquiry. They assert the preliminary evidence aligns with deliberate self-harm, though they are not yet ruling out other possibilities. The window safety latch being forcibly tampered with has drawn particular attention, and the presence of scissors at the scene is being examined. On the political front, there is increasing public pressure for DIRCO to issue a full statement, for South Africa to demand detailed forensic cooperation from France, and for any ongoing internal investigations involving Mthethwa to continue unimpeded. In South Africa, discussions are reportedly underway about more robust mental health support frameworks for diplomats abroad. Though I must note, I haven't yet confirmed a formal policy shift. Meanwhile, some media houses and opposition voices are already speculating about connections between Mthethwa's death and his role in ongoing corruption and police oversight probes. Africa-wide comparison: diplomats, deaths, and the politics of image. Nigeria, shadows of diplomacy. Nigeria has had its share of mysterious diplomat deaths. In 2017, a senior envoy was found dead in his Abuja residence. Local press at the time speculated about poisoning, but official reports were opaque. Like South Africa, Nigeria has a highly political diplomatic corps where appointments often double as rewards for political loyalty. That makes any tragedy abroad instantly political, feeding suspicions of cover-ups. Kenya, the stress of high office. Kenya has also seen senior public servants collapse while abroad, often in circumstances that highlight the stresses of office. The infamous case of Chris Kirubi, a billionaire with diplomatic stature, though not a serving ambassador, dying of cancer abroad, sparked conversations about whether African leaders only trust foreign hospitals. Mthethwa's case adds a twist, not just dying abroad, but dying in the very country he was accredited to under circumstances that raise red flags. Uganda and the Museveni factor. Ugandan officials abroad have occasionally been caught in scandals, from unpaid embassy rents to physical fights. While not directly comparable to a suspected suicide, they reflect another dimension: the intense stress, limited oversight, and lack of institutional support many African diplomats face. Mental health is rarely discussed, but in truth, it is the elephant in the embassy. Forward-looking lessons for Africa. 1. Mental health as a diplomatic priority. If soldiers in peacekeeping missions get trauma support, why not ambassadors? African foreign ministries must recognize that the cocktail of political pressure, distance from home, and diplomatic isolation can be lethal. 2. Transparency protocols for deaths abroad. Too often, African publics are left with half-truths. Governments should adopt protocols requiring independent forensic reviews when a diplomat dies overseas. This isn't just about justice, it's about public trust. Third merit versus patronage in appointments. Ambassadors are sometimes chosen for loyalty rather than skill. But loyalty appointments come with baggage: corruption scandals, political enemies, or unresolved controversies. Mthethwa's career, from Marikana to corruption whispers, shows how such baggage can shadow an envoy, amplifying stress. Fourth, regional solidarity. Could the AU develop a diplomatic crisis support mechanism? If one African ambassador dies abroad under suspicious circumstances, a regional body could observe, even co-investigate, ensuring transparency. It may sound fanciful, but so did ECOWAS's military standby force until it was needed. Mthethwa's legacy, from Marikana to Paris, the shadow of Marikana. Nathi Mthethwa's tenure as South Africa's Minister of Police, 2009 to 2014, will forever be linked to the Marikana massacre of August 2012, when police shot and killed 34 striking mine workers. The Farlam Commission later criticized the handling of the strike, pointing to police brutality and poor political oversight. Mthethwa always denied direct culpability, but his role as the political head of the police force meant his name was etched into that tragedy. This history matters now because South Africans will inevitably connect his death in Paris to the ghosts of Marikana, not as cause and effect, but as part of his broader public identity. It illustrates how past political scars never fully heal, even when a politician dons diplomatic attire, from police to culture. After Marikana, Mthethwa was moved to the Arts and Culture Ministry, later merged into Sports, Arts and Culture. There, he gained a different reputation, promoting heritage, supporting music and film, but also attracting criticism for extravagant budgets. Remember the infamous R22 million flag project that sparked public outrage in 2022? South Africans never let him live it down. Memes branded him Minister of Flags. So here was a man whose career spanned the extremes, from blood-soaked labor strikes to rainbow-hued cultural festivals. That duality makes his final act in Paris even more complex. Was it the weight of controversies or the loneliness of diplomacy that pushed him over the edge? Or both? Diplomatic turn: Paris and UNESCO. In February 2024, Mthethwa was appointed ambassador to France, permanent delegate to UNESCO, and concurrently ambassador to Monaco. It was, in many ways, a soft landing, a chance to step out of domestic controversy and into the polished world of Parisian diplomacy. But ambassadorships are not simply retirement homes for political veterans. They come with new pressures. maintaining South Africa's image abroad, negotiating at UNESCO, and balancing France-South Africa relations during a time when Paris is recalibrating its Africa policy, with military exits from the Sahel and growing Chinese-Russian competition. Political implications for the ANC. 1. Embarrassment at a delicate time. The ANC is already struggling with declining public trust, worsening service delivery, and 2026 elections looming. Mthethwa's death reopens uncomfortable questions about how the ANC recycles tainted leaders into cushy diplomatic posts. 2. A divided legacy. For some in the ANC, Mthethwa was a loyal cadre who paid his dues. For others, especially civil society and opposition parties, he symbolized the party's failure to hold leaders accountable for Marikana and other scandals. His death may freeze those debates, but it will not erase them. 3. The risk of conspiracy politics. South Africa's body politic is fertile ground for conspiracy theories. Some will say, he knew too much. Others will insist he was silenced to bury secrets. Regardless of truth, the ANC must brace for narratives that it cannot control. Africa-wide reflection. This incident reveals a broader African problem: political recycling. Across the continent, ruling parties often reward controversial figures with ambassadorial postings. Nigeria, Kenya, Zimbabwe, and Sierra Leone have all done the same. But when these appointees die, defect, or embarrass their countries abroad, the cost is not just national but continental. Africa's image suffers. If Africa wants to project soft power globally, perhaps it's time to professionalize the diplomatic corps rather than using it as a retirement plan for politicians with baggage heavier than their suitcases. Forward-looking questions. Will South Africa institute stricter vetting for ambassadorial posts? Will the ANC learn from this episode, or will the recycling continue? Could this tragedy become a catalyst for mental health conversations in African diplomacy? And most importantly, how will history remember Nathi Mthethwa as the Marikana minister, the minister of flags, or the ambassador who fell in Paris? Media and public reactions. South African media headlines on October 1st, 2025 read like a collision between shock and cynicism. News 24 called it an untimely death, focusing on the grief of his family and tributes from DIRCO. Opposition figures, however, were less restrained, with the EFF already demanding clarity on whether corruption inquiries tied to Mthethwa would be quietly buried with him. Civil society voices reminded the public of Marikana, insisting that history should not be sanitized by tragedy. In France, the story made front pages because of its dramatic circumstances: a foreign ambassador, a 22nd floor fall, scissors forcing a window, and a suicide note. Le Parisien described it as an unusual and troubling case, while French police sources emphasized the absence of foul play, perhaps to reassure the public that no international scandal was brewing. Policy recommendations: what Africa must learn. 1. Mental health as a diplomatic imperative. Ambassadors operate under immense pressure, balancing state interests abroad while cut off from home support systems. African foreign ministries should institutionalize mandatory psychological support, routine check-ins, and confidential counseling for diplomats and their families. The AU could even establish a diplomatic wellness desk, making it a continental norm. 2. Independent forensic reviews. When diplomats die abroad, investigations are usually left to host countries. This invites suspicion of cover-ups. Africa should push for AU-coordinated forensic protocols, ensuring independent oversight. Much like peacekeeping rules of engagement, this would reassure both domestic publics and international partners. 3. Reforming ambassadorial appointments. Too often, ambassadorships are given as political rewards. Africa needs a professional diplomatic service where ambassadors are career-trained experts, not recycled politicians escaping scandals. South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya could lead this reform, setting a precedent for the continent. 4. Transparency protocols for home governments. Governments must be required to issue timely, full statements in cases like this. Secrecy only fuels conspiracy. By being transparent, African states could build public trust while protecting the dignity of the deceased. 5. Regional solidarity in crisis. Imagine an AU-level rapid diplomatic incident response team. Part investigators, part counselors, part crisis communicators. When a diplomat dies in Paris, London, or Beijing, the AU sends a small team to support both the family and the investigation. It may sound utopian, but Africa's reputation abroad is a shared asset. Looking forward, this tragedy could become either another footnote in South Africa's long list of political scandals or a turning point. If Pretoria uses it to reform how ambassadors are appointed, supported, and held accountable, Mthethwa's death may ironically become his most constructive legacy. For Africa more broadly, the lesson is simple. Diplomacy is not just about cocktail parties and UN speeches. It's also about human beings under extraordinary pressure. And when African diplomats crack under that pressure, it reflects not only on their countries, but on the continent. A diplomatic tragedy in Paris, reconstructing the death of Ambassador Nathi Mthethwa and what it means for Africa. South Africa woke up on September 30th, 2025 to the kind of headline no foreign ministry ever wants to draft. Ambassador Emmanuel Nkosinathi, Nathi Mthethwa, 58, ex-police minister, ex-arts and culture minister, appointed to Paris and UNESCO Monaco in 2024, was found dead at the base of the Hyatt Regency in Port Maillot, Paris. French authorities say he had been staying on the 22nd floor, the window's safety latch was tampered with, and, crucially, no signs of struggle or drugs were found at the scene. His wife had alerted police roughly 24 hours earlier after receiving a distressing message. An inquiry is underway. South Africa's foreign ministry, DIRCO, has confirmed his passing and expressed deep sorrow with a formal media statement dated September 30th, 2025. Fuller detail is expected as French investigators proceed. Mthethwa's public life spans the moral peaks and valleys of South Africa's democratic era. Anti-apartheid unionist, cabinet heavyweight, and indelibly police minister during the 2012 Marikana massacre, a stain that outlived his portfolio and shadowed his later cultural and diplomatic roles. What we know so far and why it matters. Timeline and location: reported missing late September, 29 after a worrying message to his wife, body discovered at dawn on September, 30 in the hotel's inner courtyard. Investigators say he stayed on the 22nd floor and the window safety device had been forced. No struggle or drug traces reported in early checks. Investigative posture: French prosecutors are treating this as a high-profile, open-cause fatality. Preliminary indications lean towards self-harm, but the judicial police are running a full probe. South Africa has signaled cooperation while it manages domestic communications. Status and standing: he presented credentials in 2024, serving ambassador to France and permanent delegate to UNESCO and to Monaco until his death on September 30, 2025. Why it matters: because facts shape legitimacy. A conclusive, transparent investigation will either still the rumor mill or supercharge it. France's forensics and Pretoria's communication discipline are, for better or worse, now part of the political story. Critical lens: power, pressure, and the human cost. 1. The burden of symbol and self. Ambassadors are public symbols who carry private lives. Distance from home networks, political baggage, and relentless protocol can fray anyone's mental fabric. If peacekeepers get trauma support, why not envoys? 2. Opacity breeds conspiracy. Africa's publics know the pattern. Prominent figure dies abroad, limited detail, permanent suspicion. The only antidote is rapid, sourced, line-by-line clarity. Paris must show its work. Pretoria must echo it. 3. The long shadow of Marikana. Even if unrelated causally, Marikana remains a moral yardstick for Mthethwa's legacy and the ANC's accountability culture. Any soft focus eulogies will meet hard questions from victims' families and civil society. Africa-wide comparison, diplomats, deaths, and the politics of image. Professional versus patronage postings. Across the continent, ambassadorships are often political rewards. That practice imports domestic controversies into foreign chancelleries and raises reputational risk when crises hit. South Africa is hardly alone. Nigeria, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, and others display similar patterns, though Pretoria's media scrutiny is stronger than most. Crisis handling abroad. European hosts typically run point on forensics. African sending states vary in how assertively they demand detail. Compared with many peers, South Africa faces a more confrontational domestic press, which can be a feature transparency or a bug speculation, depending on how DIRCO and the presidency communicate. Mental health blind spot. From Addis to Abuja, diplomatic wellness is not systematized. Yet the job mixes high stakes plus isolation plus patronage politics, a combustible blend we keep treating as prestige only. Forward-looking reforms, concrete, doable, needed now. 1. Institutionalize diplomatic mental health support, mandatory pre-posting screenings, quarterly confidential check-ins, and family access to counseling. Emergency on-call psychologists embedded via host country providers. AU could seat a diplomatic wellness desk that member states can tap in crises. Think tiny, expert, practical. 2. AU observed forensic protocols for deaths abroad. Not to usurp host country jurisdiction, but to observe and validate chain of custody and evidence handling in sensitive cases, reducing accusations of cover-ups. A light-touch rapid diplomatic incident team. 3. Merit-first ambassadorial corps. Set skills-based criteria, languages, negotiation track record, cultural diplomacy, crisis management. Limit recycling of scandal-laden political figures into embassies. Prestige postings should not double as political exile or reward. 4. Crisis communication playbook. Within 24 hours, A. Verified timeline. B. Investigative locus. C. Known unknowns. D. Next update time. Publish a single source of truth microsite with documents and FAQs to drain the conspiracy swamp. DIRCO's initial statement is a good start, but can be systematized. 5. Duty of care standards with host countries. MOUs with capitals like Paris, London, Washington to audit hotel safety practices for official bookings, window restrictors, balcony barriers, CCTV coverage, plus rapid access for consular reps during incidents, media and political weather check, early signals. France. Prosecutors emphasize there's no evidence of struggle and highlight the forcibly opened window. The judicial police are leading. Tone, unusual, troubling, but procedural. South Africa. DIRCO has confirmed the death. The presidency and major outlets are publicly mourning, while civil society voices resurface Marikana and call for an unblinking inquiry. Expect opposition parties to question political appointments and demand continuity of any probes linked to his prior portfolios. Public discourse. Social channels are a blend of genuine grief, dark satire, yes, the flag memes are back, and hard questions about wellness, vetting, and accountability for elites. We'll track the discourse as verified reports accumulate. Mthethwa's contested legacy, 3 lenses. 1. Security and accountability, Marikana. The Farlam Commission scolded police command decisions and recommended further probes. Political accountability stayed muddy. That ambiguity follows Mthethwa into history and now into the ethics of commemoration. 2. Culture and optics, the flag era. As arts and culture minister, nation branding ambitions sometimes clashed with public austerity politics, producing enduring skepticism about elite symbolism versus lived reality. That skepticism informs today's reactions. 3. Diplomacy and soft power, Paris UNESCO. His portfolio in France mattered. UNESCO is where African heritage, restitution, and cultural industries get debated. His sudden absence creates a representation vacuum at an inconvenient time. What comes next? Scenarios to watch. Forensics. If Paris produces a clear, evidence-rich report with timeline, devices, room access logs, talk screens, public attention may settle on wellness and vetting reforms rather than intrigue. If not, conspiracy narratives will metastasize. Policy response. Pretoria has an opportunity to announce mental health protocols and merit-based posting reforms. Small moves with outsized trust returns. Regional spillover. The AU and SADC could pilot a voluntary, minimal footprint observer protocol for deaths of senior officials abroad. Politically sensitive, yes, but reputationally wise. The hard advice to African leaders. 1. Stop treating diplomacy as a retirement plan. Ambassadorships should not be cushioned landings for politicians with baggage heavier than their diplomatic pouches. Africa needs professional corps with training, skills, and resilience, not redeployment of scandal-scarred veterans. 2. Invest in human beings, not just prestige. If you can fund fleets of SUVs and billion-rand flag projects, you can fund basic wellness programs for ambassadors and their families. A diplomat's mind is as strategic as their policy brief. 3. Transparency builds trust. Silence breeds suspicion. In cases like Mthethwa's, the instinct to close ranks is deadly. Every half answer multiplies rumors tenfold. Truth, even when painful, inoculates nations against conspiracy. 4. Strengthen continental solidarity. When one African ambassador dies abroad, the AU should not be silent. Establish a small, rapid continental mechanism for support and observation. It's not just about one country, it's about Africa's collective image in global capitals. 5. Legacy is fragile. Lead with that in mind. African leaders should note, history remembers your darkest hours more than your ribbon cuttings. For Mthethwa, Marikana will always loom larger than UNESCO. Every decision counts double when lives and trust are at stake. Key messages to take away. Mthethwa's death in Paris is more than a personal tragedy. It's a mirror reflecting how Africa manages diplomacy, political recycling, and wellness. Transparency and accountability are essential if South Africa, and Africa at large, wants to maintain credibility at home and abroad. Diplomacy is human. Ambassadors carry not just policies, but pressures, histories, and vulnerabilities, ignoring that human side courts disaster. Africa-wide reforms, from wellness programs to forensic transparency, are not luxuries. They are necessary investments in continental credibility. Finally, as much as this story is about one man, it is also about a system that must evolve. The future of African diplomacy depends on whether leaders listen, reform, and adapt, or repeat the same old cycles, hoping the next tragedy doesn't land on their desk. Thank you for watching The Bold African Voice, BAV, where we connect Africa's news to Africa's future. This story is not just about one man, it is about Africa's diplomacy, accountability, and the human cost of leadership. If our leaders will not learn from tragedies like this, then history will keep teaching us the hard way. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into Africa's most important stories. Together, we make Africa's voice bold.